Whiteout conditions in Orillia trigger a massive vehicle pileup. One person is dead. Several others are in hospital.
A cold case dating back to the 90s finally solved. Police tracked down the alleged killer in the murder of a pregnant woman strangled to death in a Toronto parking lot. How detectives found answers 26 years later.
And another day, another announcement from all provincial party leaders. Where were they today? And what does the latest public opinion poll say about where the candidates might stand?
This is Live at 5. Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us here on Live at 5. One person is confirmed dead after a major pileup in Orillia.
This happened shortly after 9 o'clock this morning on Highway 11 near Highway 12 during whiteout conditions. Police tell us the person killed is 49 years old, but they haven't released their name. Several other people were transported to hospital after the collision. Transit buses were called in to take people off of the highway safely. Tow trucks have been dispatched as some vehicles are still in ditches.
We're asking anyone for assistance if they have dash cam footage or have any information in regards to this occurrence. Please contact the OPP at 1-888-310-1122, or you can contact your local area Crime Stoppers if you wish to remain anonymous. The Rotary Place at 100 University Avenue here in Orillia has been opened up as a warming center for the people that have been involved and affected by this occurrence.
And Sony Subra is a tow truck driver who spoke to CP24 from the scene of that crash.
There's a lots of car involved and then trucks involved, and there's a major collision in front of me. And then that's they are doing the investigation there. There's a multiple tow trucks are here and then trying to clear that wreckage. There are still lots of cars to go, and then lots of trucks need to be cleared, so they can open the lane. Maybe, I don't know how long it's going to take.
You see right here, transit buses, those were used to shuttle people who were trapped on Highway 11 to a sports complex in Orillia. Motorists, they talked about the weather conditions and the pileup.
The roads were nice. We were coming from Burkes Falls, and once we got south of Washago, things deteriorated pretty rapidly. We were going fairly slow, and when visibility went bad, I noticed some red lights, so I told my wife to slow down, and before you know it, we were right into it. There was cars smashing, and luckily nothing hit us, and we were right in the middle between the back and the front, but we could see the cars colliding in behind us.
You have no reaction, or you can't do anything once you start sliding, and you're in one of those situations, there's nothing you can do. So even though I wasn't going very fast, didn't really make any difference. It was just all one big chain reaction, trucks piling up, and we got into the pileup, and then people piled into us from behind.
Highway 11 will be closed for the foreseeable future. Northbound from Coldwater to the 400 and southbound from County Road 169 to Line 15. Police say they're not yet clear exactly how many vehicles were involved.
A man's in hospital following a stabbing in Scarborough this afternoon.
Police say they were called to the area of Ellesmere Road and Scarborough Golf Club Road shortly before 3:30 p.m. Upon arrival, officers located a man in his 40s suffering from stab wounds. Paramedics say he was taken to a trauma center with serious, potentially life-threatening injuries. The suspect is described as a man in his 40s, 5'5" with a slim build. Drivers are being advised about road closures in the area.
Catching a killer in a decades-old cold case, detectives believe that they've tracked down the killer responsible for the brutal murder of a young woman in 1998.
Yeah, our crime analyst Steve Ryan is following the story very closely. And Steve, you remember this case from your time leading Toronto's cold case squad.
Yeah, that's right. I had the privilege of leading the cold case squad in the mid-2000-ish, I would say around 2013, 2016 or 17. And when my team would look for leads with some of these cold cases, I would always keep a picture of the deceased under my blotter. And Donna's picture was in the top left-hand side of my blotter.
This picture right here?
That picture right there. And I remember the name going to the press conference this morning, but you forget images as time passes. And when I saw her picture this morning at this press conference, my knees buckled. And I literally had to sit down because that picture just brought me right back to the days of investigating these cold cases and trying to find the person who killed her. We couldn't find her, of course, but the great work now by the cold case squad with this new technology, the Detective Sergeant Steve Smith, who's in charge, him and his team has done some remarkable work solving a lot of these outstanding cases. But it certainly was a moment of reflection for me, this morning when I saw that picture, because it certainly did bring me back to those days.
See, she was pregnant with her second child when she was strangled.
She was.
Let's talk about today's announcement, the closure for the family.
Yeah, so there really is no such thing as closure, and I appreciate when people say that, but at least the family has some answers right now. And Donna hopefully can rest peacefully knowing now that the person who the police believe killed her is now in custody. And this was done as a result of this new technology I was talking about, this genetic genealogy. And genealogists, instead of looking for exact matches in DNA, they look to distant relatives. And the closer they find, or the closer they look at these distant relatives, the closer they will get to a match. And some tremendous work by Steve Smith and his team. And he also mentioned the work of the scientists at the CFS and these genealogists who really did some great work today in apprehending this guy. I'm going to play a clip from the press conference earlier, and I'll talk about how they arrested this guy. Let's listen to the clip.
It was investigative genetic genealogy that led us to this arrest. We'd had the accused's DNA at the crime scene, but he was unknown to us. We were able to, in 2022, utilize investigative genetic genealogy that led us to the offender's family. We were able to collect a DNA sample and prove that Mr. Ackerman was the person responsible for the death of Miss Oglieve.
Toronto police think they finally have some answers. Steve, what's next?
So they have reasonable grounds to believe that this guy, Ackerman, is the killer based on the genetic genealogy. Now they have to get a DNA warrant. So they'll get a court authorization to take blood from this guy, and they'll match his blood with the DNA at the scene, and that will give him the 100% match. And that is the evidence that will be brought before the court. So there's a lot of work still to be done. But again, great work by the Toronto police, and I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can feel that you're emotional about this, Steve, because it's personal.
It is.
Steve, thanks so much for this.
Okay.
What a story.
Okay.
Okay, with that, it's now 5:07. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24 traffic specialist Adjoa Interior-Yabois. Ad, this has been a very busy day for you.
Yeah, it has. We are dealing with so many delays. It's a Friday. It's rush hour to be expected, but it's extremely slow on most of the major area highways, and adding to your slowdowns. We have a little bit of a problem. It's a stall off to the side. This is the southbound lanes of the Don Valley Parkway, just as you make your way on the approach to Bayview Bloor. But we do have a Toronto transportation crew there in the right lane, so quickly starting to create a delay as you make your way on the southbound side. Trying to get out of the downtown core and the westbound Gardner, start your weekend right. It is barely moving as you head from Cherry Street all the way out towards about the Dufferin stretch. And you know what? We had some problems on the eastbound 401 in the collectors at Leslie. It was a stalled transport. It did have the right lane blocked, and it looks like that problem cleared. Outside of camera view on the westbound lanes of the 407 just west of Dufferin. Heads up, it's a vehicle fire cleanup, and it does have the two right lanes occupied. I'll send it back to you both.
Okay. Adjoa, thanks so much. It's 5:08, -5 out there. You're watching Live at 5.
The campaign for power at Queen's Park continues along the campaign trail. We're going to break down some exclusive polling info for you. That's next.
Welcome back. Exclusive nightly polling for CTV News done by Nanos Research suggests Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives have a 16-point lead in the provincial election race.
As of yesterday, the PCs were polling at 46% support, followed by the Liberals at 30%. The NDP is lagging behind with just under 16% support, while the Greens are sitting at 6%.
And Nanos is also tracking who Ontarians would prefer as premier. Ford is also leading this at 39%, followed by Crombie at 25%, Marit Stiles at 16%, and Mike Schreiner at 5%. The survey of 900 Ontarians is said to be accurate within 3.3 percentage points, 19 times out of 20.
Another provincial campaign trail, two of the party leaders headed north today, where healthcare and the doctor shortage, that is also a big issue.
Yeah, meantime, PC leader Doug Ford was making a promise about easing gridlock in the GTA. CP24's Lindsay Biscaya joins us live with the latest on this election. Lindsay.
Yeah, and Lena and Bakari, I'm going to pick up where you left off there when we talk about easing gridlock, because that's kind of the grabby headline of today. You might remember an idea that was pitched by Doug Ford back in the fall about building a tunnel under the 401. It got a lot of headlines because it was kind of a first. Well, he was talking about that today. It's not so much an idea anymore as it is a campaign promise by PC leader Doug Ford. He was saying today, if elected, his government would move forward with that tunnel. It would span all the way from Brampton past Markham, all in an effort to ease gridlock. Here's more from Doug Ford today.
The tunnel, which will include both vehicle and transit lanes, will extend beyond Brampton and Mississauga in the west, beyond Markham and Scarborough in the east. It'll be one of the largest, most ambitious infrastructure projects in the entire world. Critically, with the threat of the tariffs and job losses, building the 401 Express Tunnel will create thousands and thousands of jobs for many, many years to come.
So obviously, no doubt, traffic is a big issue in the GTA. It's what a lot of people are talking about, but maybe not for the rest of Ontario. Is traffic in the GTA a big issue? But obviously, with Doug Ford, you just need enough votes within the GTA probably to win this election. Other party leaders in the meantime were mostly in Northern Ontario today, talking about other issues that Ontarians care about. A big one, of course, is healthcare. Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, she was in Thunder Bay today, once again talking about healthcare, speaking to the thousands of people there who are without a family doctor, because as we know, many communities north of the French River have been seeing that shortage. And she says her number one priority as premier would be to make sure everyone in Ontario has a doctor. Meanwhile, NDP leader Mart Stiles, she was in Sault Ste. Marie today, promising $4 billion over 4 years to help with primary care. She talked about taking action to make sure wait times for specialists are shorter. And she also talked about keeping hospital ERs open, something that's been a crushing issue really around the province, but especially in Northern Ontario. Take a listen.
Today, I'm announcing the Family Health Guarantee. My commitment to you that an Ontario NDP government will connect every single Ontarian to team-based primary care. It's a major shift that will make it easier and faster to get the care that you need. And here's how we're going to do it. As Premier, I'll immediately launch 100 days of action for primary care, making the quickest, most effective changes from day one, like fast-tracking the applications for new family health teams and also cutting the wait times with a central referral system. That'll make it easier to see a specialist.
And Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, he was in Parry-Sound-Muskoka today, an area that's actually had a lot of support for the Greens in the past. He was talking about affordability, pledging to cut income taxes for those who make under $65,000 a year. Lena, Bakari, back to you.
You see the opposition party leaders making this about health care, affordability, as Doug Ford makes this about tariffs. Lindsay Vizcaya joining us live from our newsroom tonight. Thanks, Lindsay. Yep. You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that Donald Trump is not joking around when it comes to taking control of Canada. More on those comments and today's summit here in Toronto. That's next. Well, business leaders and government officials, they gathered in Toronto today to discuss ways to bolster Canada's economy in the face of a possible trade war with the U.S.
Yeah, and for more on that summit today, let's bring in CP24's Melissa Duggan. So what came out of it, Melissa?
Hey there, Lena. Yeah, so it happened here at Evergreen Brickworks earlier today. About 150 people getting together, leaders in government, in labor, in private industry, to talk about trade, how to improve the situation within Canada, and also with some international partners. But it was actually some comments that happened behind closed doors that are getting a lot of attention today. We've heard a lot of talk from U.S. President Donald Trump about making Canada a 51st state. Well, today we heard Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, according to a source reported by CTV News, saying that Trudeau thinks that Trump is not joking when it comes to that threat. He says that it is real and that it's over critical minerals here in Canada. So a little insight there into how the PM was thinking. As for Trudeau's public comments, really focusing a lot on trading between provinces, to pick that up, to cut the red tape, to cancel out some policies and licenses that might make that tough. Have a listen.
We have a free trade deal with Europe that has seen opportunities grow significantly over the past years, but can we do even more? Can we look at diversifying our supply chains so that we do have those opportunities internationally as well? Can we look at new markets that we're opening up? There's so many different opportunities and challenges we can get to that there is a moment right now that we all should be talking about.
And of course, the reason why people are meeting here is because we are in the 30-day tariff pause at this point, looking to that threat of those punishing tariffs on Canadian products into the U.S. that could possibly come into effect at the beginning of March. So what we're seeing here are leaders, business leaders, talking about some ideas how to improve trade relationships within our own country even. I'm going to throw it back to you.
All right, Melissa Duggan reporting live for us tonight. Thank you, Melissa. And for more perspective on what we're hearing from today's summit, let's bring in Tom Mulcair, CTV News political commentator and former NDP leader. Tom, always good to be with you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Hey.
Hey, Tom.
So behind closed doors, our prime minister is saying, look, Donald Trump's jokes, his threats about making Canada a 51st state, they're very real. What do you take from that, Tom?
I think that Mr. Trudeau is telling people the simple truth, and he's speaking to a room full of people that is a very broad spectrum of Canadian society. On the stage with him, I recognize former senior union types, people from all parts of the business and work spectrum across the country. And he's trying to give them the goods and saying, look, when this guy starts talking about something like that, don't take it as a joke or just his usual bombast. Now, Mr. Trudeau zeroed in on what he's calling critical minerals. If you look at the actual statements that Trump has made, he's spoken more often actually about Canadian water. Both are resources, obviously. He's talked also about Greenland, and Greenland has a massive supply of this type of strategic mineral that Mr. Trudeau is talking about. So one way or the other, he's warning Canadians, don't write this guy off. He might be a bit of a loon. He didn't say that. I did. But we'd better start taking it seriously and preparing accordingly. The very existence of this type of meeting in a time of crisis, I think, is another indication that Trudeau's doing a very good job right now. He knows that he's in the final weeks of his many years in office, but I think that he's going to go out very strongly, bringing as many Canadians together to be of one mind. They're talking across the country about breaking down interprovincial barriers. That conversation's long overdue and hasn't been taken so seriously since this threat started. All of a sudden, we're being serious about it. So there is a possibility to move some of these things forward. Heck, Quebec this week even said that they were open to bringing pipelines through across Quebec from Western Canada to the Atlantic, something that they had always said no to. So it's an interesting moment in Canadian politics. Everybody seems to be, for once, rowing in the same direction.
Okay, so Tom, along these lines, speaking of the summit, critics are saying Trudeau should not be calling a summit. Trudeau should be recalling Parliament to truly address this threat. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know that there's only a few weeks left until the Liberals choose a new leader. It's a nice try. If I was in opposition, I would be saying the exact same thing. But if you go back through every single statement by Pierre Poilievre, every single recent statement by Jagmeet Singh, and by Yves-François Blanchet, the head of the Bloc, they're all saying, give us the slightest opportunity and we'll bring down the government. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that in this perilous time, there is enough instability and insecurity, and the last thing we need is to be propelled needlessly into an election. Let things roll out as they're supposed to, which is allowing the Liberals, the government, to have a new leader who will become the Prime Minister, and then take it from there. My bet is that they're going to go very rapidly to another election, and then the opposition parties will get their wish, at least in terms of having that election. But if you look at recent polling, I think that they should listen to the old admonition that you have to be careful what you wish for, because it looks like the prohibitive frontrunner in the Liberal leadership race, Mark Carney, is going to be able to give the Conservatives a run for their money despite their current lead in the polls.
Speaking of that, really quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the latest Nanos poll, which suggests that Canadians do think Mark Carney would do a better job at taking on Trump, even better than Pierre Poilievre. What does that say to you, and should Mr. Pierre Poilievre be nervous about that?
I think that Mr. Poilievre should be very concerned about it, and he's looking for a way to attack Carney. He says that he's a globalist and elitist. But Mark Carney led the Bank of Canada during some very rough economic times and did a great job. Led the Bank of England through Brexit and did a great job. Has headed up some of the largest investment funds in the world and had major roles at the United Nations on climate change and sustainable development. He's got one of the richest curriculum vitae you could ever see. Mr. Poilievre's been a politician. That's what he's done. And so I think that he's very nervous because Mark Carney is very attractive to Canadians. This week we had a poll in Quebec that showed that with Carney as the leader, the Liberals would win way over the Bloc Québécois on the Quebec side.
Okay, former NDP leader and CTV News political commentator Tom Mulcair, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for your time.
Great to be with you. All the best.
Thank you. Well, you're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
We're heading into the weekend, which means that we've got a fresh batch of movie reviews from film critic Richard Krause. His take on some new films is next.
Welcome back. The weekend almost here, which means lots of new movies are hitting theaters and streaming services.
Now, in every revolution, someone has to.
Jude Law stars in the true crime drama The Order. Tells the story of an FBI agent who suspects a series of bank robberies and car heists are the work of a group of domestic terrorists. Film critic Richard Krause gives this 3.5 stars.
This is based on a true story, and in a lot of ways, it's the kind of police procedural that we've seen a lot of times before. You've got a very driven police officer on one side, and then a very driven bad guy on the other side, and of course, they're going to butt heads, each determined for their side to win. But the amount of tension that this movie manages to build into that familiar story, plus the way that it shines a light on the dark underbelly of white nationalism, I think really gives it a recommend.
With no motive yet uncovered.
Okay, Hard Eyes. This is a comedy slasher flick that revolves around a serial killer who murders couples on Valentine's Day. A pair of co-workers, they find themselves in his crosshairs when he mistakes them for a romantic item. Krause gives this one 3 stars.
It's a weird mix of genres. The kills in this are quite gory. There's a lot of really kind of terrible stuff that happens in this movie, but it's also a movie about romance, about falling in love. And so it's kind of an interesting mix. I think it works more than it doesn't, and it made me laugh quite a few times.
528 minus 5, you're watching Live at 5.
And we're learning more about closed-door comments made by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about U.S. President Donald Trump and his aspirations for this country. More on that story coming up. And the Prime Minister tells business leaders Trump's 51st state threat, that's a real thing. We're going to tell you more about what happened at an economic summit about tariffs today.
A cold case dating back to the 90s finally solved. Police tracked down the alleged killer in the murder of a pregnant woman strangled to death in a Toronto parking lot. How detectives found answers 26 years later.
Another day, another announcement from all the provincial party leaders. Where were they today? And what does the latest public opinion poll say about where the candidates stand?
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for being with us. I'm Lena Latafat.
I'm Bakari Savage. CTV News has learned that behind closed doors at today's summit on bolstering the Canadian economy, Trudeau said that he believes U.S. President Donald Trump is not joking about making Canada the 51st state.
Trudeau says it is a real thing, in part due to Trump's desire to gain access to Canada's critical minerals. CTV Question Period asked Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne about Trump's desire to absorb Canada into the U.S., and he says Canada's sovereignty is unbreakable.
Listen, my job is to remind them that, you know, no one can break the will of Canadian and the pride of Canadians and the sovereignty of Canada. This is not going to happen. And the way we can convey that message in Washington is by being strong, by being resilient, and by doing the things that we've just talked about. Because the more resilient we are, the more confident we are, and the more prosperous we are. And I can tell you the tone has changed I've seen in Washington this week.
And you can watch the full interview Sunday on CTV Question Period with Vashi Capello.
And for more on that summit where the Prime Minister made those remarks, let's bring in CP24's Melissa Duggan. And these comments were made behind closed doors, Melissa, but it really gives you a sense of how Justin Trudeau really feels about this.
Yeah, some interesting insight there. Yeah, so those comments came behind closed doors, but we did see Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in front of a crowd today too, talking to a room full of leaders in different industries. Think energy, manufacturing, banking, and also different elected officials as well. You know, he had his sleeves rolled up, microphone in hand, trying to inspire the group to build some stronger relationships and talk about Canadian trade in a way that maybe we haven't before. And that's because we're looking at this threat coming from the U.S. Yes, we're now in this 30-day pause on those punishing tariffs that we could see put in place at the beginning of March. So what do we do in the meantime? Today was about building some connections and generating some ideas. We heard from, as you just played a clip from François-Philippe Champagne. Well, the minister had a bit of a standout line today, I think. He said the rules of the game have changed. And it's because of that a new plan is coming together, a new strategy to think about how Canadian trade could be improved within our own country and also looking to new trade partners in Europe and in Asia and in Australia to not lean so much on the U.S. I want to share another comment from Champagne, but first, another minister. Here's Anita Anand.
We have to make sure that we are trading with multiple partners in multiple locations. Canada is the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. That means while we address a situation with the U.S., while we move to eliminate interprovincial barriers to trade, we are also ensuring that we diversify Canadian supply chains for Canadian manufactured products.
This is about Canada being ambitious. This is about Canada being confident. This is about Canada winning in the economy of the 21st century. I can tell you in our conversation we had in Washington, there's never been a better time to make the case for Canada. We know we have a reprieve, but we need to double down and making sure that our American friends understand the integrated nature of our relationship. The fact that we buy more from the United States than China, Japan, the UK, and France combined. And I would say Canada has everything to succeed.
Bakari and Lena, another standout moment from today that got kind of a round of applause from this group that got together is when Trudeau talked about removing those trade barriers within Canada. So certainly a lot of momentum there, a lot of interest in that to get interprovincial trade really picked up and without so much red tape involved. Back to you.
All right, Melissa Duggan reporting live for us. Appreciate it as always, Melissa. Also making news, traffic tie-up in North York this afternoon after a multi-vehicle collision.
Chopper 24 was over the crash. This is on Leslie, south of York Mills. Police say 4 vehicles were involved in the crash. One car ended up on its side on the sidewalk. So paramedics tell us one person suffered minor injuries. And with that, it's 5:35. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa Nsiah. Look, I'm tripping up because there's so many crashes today. What is happening?
I don't know. You know, we're not dealing with any really horrible weather, at least in the GTHA, but we're dealing with a lot of problems. Maybe it's Friday, long weekend. People are trying to start their weekend, right? But I will show you problems also on city streets. Besides the Leslie issue, which you guys were talking about, we have these problems that are happening on Morningside. Southbound lanes of Morningside looks like it's the 2 left lanes that are blocked right at the 401. So this collision creating a bit of a delay for commuters that are just trying to get home. If your travels take you on to the northbound 404, this is just north of Highway 7. We have a stalled bus. It's off to the side, but we have MTO crews blocking the HOV lane, so that's adding to more slowdowns for your commute. A bit of good news. We had some problems on the westbound 401 through Avenue Road that cleared in the collectors, but you can see the 401 is just very busy across the top of the city. And in case you haven't heard about it, and maybe you're heading north of the city towards Highway 11, you will find Highway 11 closed for a big stretch because of a multi-vehicle collision which happened through Orillia. You will find it shut down both ways between Highway 69 and the split in Barrie. I'll send it back to you both.
Thanks, Adjoa.
You're welcome.
A man is in hospital following a stabbing in Scarborough this afternoon.
Yeah, police say that they were called to the area of Ellesmere Road and Scarborough Golf Club Road shortly before 3:30. Here's a live look at the scene right now. Okay, going back. Upon arrival, officers, they found a man in his 40s. He had been stabbed. Paramedics say that he was taken to a trauma center with serious, potentially life-threatening injuries. The suspect is described as a man in his 40s, about 5'5", with a slim build. Drivers are being advised about the road closures in the area. Okay, now going to one of our top stories. Yeah. Catching a killer in a decades-old cold case. This doesn't happen every day, but detectives now believe that they've tracked down the killer responsible for the brutal murder of a young woman in 1998.
Yeah, our crime analyst Steve Ryan is following this story. And Steve, you led Toronto's cold case squad for a number of years. I just have to ask you about the family, because I've been thinking about them all day. What would a phone call like that mean to the family? Hey, 26 years later, we think we found the killer.
Oftentimes, investigators stay in contact with family members, particularly those who just have that death in the front of their every being. So I can only speak from my own experience, and the call goes something like, first off, if you can do it face-to-face, you would, but oftentimes with cold cases, family have moved away or they may be in different parts of the country. So the last time I had the opportunity to do that, it was with the Melanie Beerson case, and that had been an unsolved case for almost 30 years. And a call goes like this, Miss So-and-so, we think we got him. Just like that. And that's a far cry from telling Miss So-and-so that your child is murdered. Now you're telling them the opposite, that we think we've got the person who did it. And it just snowballs from there, if you will, just grief.
And then to get a call like that 26 years later when you might have given up.
Well, that's right. And oftentimes an investigator doesn't tip their hand as to what's going on in a case, even if there are leads. So you might call me one day, for hypothetically, and say, are there any new leads in my son's murder from 15 years ago? And I might have Macari in sights, and we may be investigating him, but I would never say to you, we think we may have somebody, because what that does is it takes the family from there crashing down. So a family really is kept in the dark intentionally, and that's to save their own heartache, and they don't hear from the investigators until such time that they are 100% confident that they believe they've got the guy based on reasonable grounds, and that's how it goes.
I want to pick up on something you said, not giving up. You said that you had Ogilvy's photo on your desk. How much sleep, how much time, how much sleep did you lose, like trying to find who strangled her in 1998?
So in cold case, I oversaw a team of tremendous investigators, both police officers and civilians, who did most of the work, to be honest with you. But when we opened up a new cold case, and we would work 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 cases at a time, looking for any sort of lead to advance the case, I always had pictures of the deceased on my blotter. And I was saying earlier, you and I, or we were all talking earlier, I recognized Donna's name, but images fade in time, of course. And when I saw her picture today at that press conference, it just brought me right back. And I'm not the only investigator that feels that way. As a homicide detective, man, you wear these cases day in and day out with the families.
Yeah, it's so emotional for the families, of course, but so emotional for the investigators as well. Thank you for highlighting that, Steve.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your time. You're watching Live at 5 right here on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Coming up, taking the temperature on the provincial campaign trail as party leaders push to improve their position at Queen's Park. That's coming up next. Exclusive nightly polling for CTV News done by Nanos Research suggests Ford's progressive conservatives have a 16-point lead in the provincial election race.
As of yesterday, the PCs were polling at 46% support, followed by the Liberals at 30%. The NDP is lagging behind with just under 16% support, while the Greens are sitting at 6%.
Nanos is also tracking who Ontarians would prefer as premier. Ford's also leading this at 39%, followed by Bonnie Crombie at 25%, Mark Childs at 16%, Mike Schreiner, 5%. A survey of 900 Ontarians is said to be accurate within 3.3 percentage points, 19 times out of 20.
Canadians are very focused on Trump and tariffs and the implications for the Ontario election. But, the thing is what we do know is people in Ontario are still worried about the economy. They're still worried about healthcare. They're still worried about education. So Trump will be part of the backdrop, But you know what? Those other issues are still going to be really important, and Ontarians are going to want to hear from all the provincial leaders on that.
CP24's Lindsay Biscaya joins us live with the latest on the campaign trail. Lindsay.
Yeah, and those are some pretty interesting findings, Lena and Bakari, when it comes to that latest poll. So for more on that, I want to bring in political strategist John Capobianco. John, good to have you. Thanks for joining us. Okay, I'm assuming you saw those numbers as well. Probably not a surprise that the Conservatives are in a lead like that. This is probably what they thought, which is why they wanted to call that snap election. But are you surprised by the other findings, the fact that the Liberal Party is firmly in second place?
Well, I think that's the real battle and going into this election was who's going to be in second place. I think the NDP and the Liberals have always sort of been at that tied position going into the election and who was going to be able to get the attention of voters. And certainly it's only been a week and a couple of days since the writ was dropped, since the election started. And I think obviously I would rather be in the position that Doug Ford is in with a sizable lead. And the fact that he's maintained a sizable lead because it's been a week and a few days in the election campaign, I think shows that his message has been strong. Now, mind you, as we all know, the past week has been totally dominated by President Trump and his imposition of a potential 25% tariff, which of course was staved off on this past Monday. But that message was really important and critical to Doug Ford because he went into the election with a tagline that was Protect Ontario, and the whole thing about him wanting to be the one that actually protected Ontario and Ontario taxpayers against a potential tariff. So that really worked well for him in the past week.
Right, and we've seen that in some new campaign ads from his party talking about those tariffs and how he would be the person to help Ontario through any potential tariff threats. If hypothetically, though, I mean, March 1st is just right after the provincial election, but if something happened in the meantime and Donald Trump came out and said, okay, no tariffs for Canada, do you think that would really change things, or do you think Doug Ford has strong support, mostly throughout the GTA and Muskoka area, to really just keep a hold on this campaign and come out on top?
Yeah, I think, we also know that the delay's been until March the 1st or March 4th, whenever it is. But we also know the unpredictability of President Trump. We know that he could say one thing today and then tomorrow can go on social media and say something else. So the threat of the tariffs are going to be still exist. And the fact that we're seeing the federal government, the Liberals federally, working on this, they had a council and a session today to talk about it. So the fact that those threats still are real and perceived to be real, then the Ford message is still very much relevant and still exists. So, campaigns matter. Polls are always a snapshot in time, and we still have a few more weeks to go. But I do believe, and Nick Nano said this earlier, that other issues, healthcare and some of the other issues that the other campaigns are bringing up are going to come to fore over the course of the next little while. And I would imagine that the campaigns are going to try, Lindsay, to pick up on that. Every campaign builds a narrative going into an election, right? They want a story that they want to tell. The NDP, it's about being on your side. The Liberals, it's more for you. And of course, with Doug Ford, it's Protect Ontario. Which of those are going to carry the day over the course of the next little while is going to be important.
And that's a perfect segue into my very last question, just quickly, because of course the other party leaders are mostly campaigning a lot on affordability, but also healthcare is a really big topic for Bonnie Crombie, Marit Stiles, Mike Schreiner. Do you think that's resonating with Ontarians right now?
I don't think it resonated that much on the first week because of the news cycle and because there was so much attention to what was happening in the U.S. and this trade tariff issue. And I think that because there's a pause on that, I still think Ontarians, in fact, Canadians, are going to be quite nervous and quite anxious about that. I think there's always going to be this threat, and we don't know if March the 1st is going to come and there's going to be a tax or not. So I think that permeates, I think, a lot of people's anxiousness and what they believe is going to be a problem in the next little while. And I do think that speaks to affordability because, of course, if those tariffs come into place, prices are going to go up, gas and groceries are going to go up. So that whole issue of affordability, which has been a problem for a lot of Ontarians and Canadians going into the election, I think is still going to exist. But without a doubt, healthcare, education are always issues. And I think that Doug Ford feels pretty comfortable that he's been able to really put a lot of investments in that going into the election.
Okay, political strategist John Capobianco. I'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. So there you go, Lena and Bakari. Interesting that, we've still got a couple of weeks left in this campaign, but it seems Donald Trump has a big hand to play in terms of what happens here in Ontario politics. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, he keeps coming up. Lindsay, thanks so much for this. You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
All right, coming up, asking Canadians who they think is best suited to take on Donald Trump. We're going to have the results of the new poll next.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he intends to impose reciprocal tariffs on several countries in a matter of days.
I'll be announcing that next week, reciprocal trade, so that we're treated evenly with other countries. We don't want any more or any less. So I'll be announcing that next week. And many other things having to do not even with trade, but other things. But I'll be talking about reciprocal trade sometime next week. We'll have a news conference and we'll lay it out. Pretty simple.
Okay, so Trump promised during the campaign to place duties on American imports equal to the rates that trading partners impose on U.S. exports. It's not clear which countries or sectors will be affected. And Trump and his aides have said they intend to use higher tariffs to pay for extending tax cuts from 2017 that budget analysts have warned could add trillions to the U.S. debt.
And a new survey finds Canadians believe Mark Carney would do the best job at negotiating with U.S. President Donald Trump.
That's compared to not only his liberal leadership rivals, Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould, but also conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. The Nanos research poll finds 40% of respondents believe Carney would do the best job. Poilievre was second, with 26% saying that he'd be the best at negotiating with Trump. 13% chose Freeland, and just 1% think Gould would be the best choice, and 12% you just weren't sure. The leaders of other parties are not listed as options in the survey.
Liberal leadership hopefuls must pony up another big payment today if they want to stay in the race.
The candidates must pay another $125,000 to the party. That's on top of the $100,000 they've already paid, and they'll need to fork out another $125,000 by February 17th. On Thursday, former Liberal House leader and leadership candidate Karina Gould said her campaign is doing everything it can to remain in the race despite not having the resources of her main rivals. Former MP Frank Bayless says he's going to meet all the deadlines. Three other candidates remain in the race: former central bank governor Mark Carney and former deputy prime minister Chrystia Freeland, widely seen as the frontrunners, and former MP Ruby Dalla.
The country's labor market beat economists' expectations last month.
Statistics Canada says that the economy added 76,000 jobs in January. The unemployment rate dipped to 6.6% and its second consecutive monthly decline. Economists had anticipated employers would add just 25,000 jobs and unemployment would inch up to 6.8%. The manufacturing sector saw the largest employment gains, adding 33,000 jobs, with a third of them coming from Ontario alone.
5:54 minus 5. You're watching Live at 5.
And the stage is set for a Super Bowl showdown. More on the excitement on and off the field just ahead. The Chiefs and Eagles are busy preparing for the Super Bowl on Sunday. It's happening in New Orleans.
Both teams have been practicing all week for the game that pits arguably the best roster on paper in football against the back-to-back champions. There has never been an NFL team to win 3 straight championships in the Super Bowl era. Both teams are also looking relatively healthy prior to Sunday with no major injuries to key players. Kickoff is at 6:30 p.m.
Well, Kendrick Lamar is going to be the first solo hip-hop halftime performer in Super Bowl history on Sunday.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
Okay, a lot of people talking about this. Lamar says he's aiming to infuse his Los Angeles hip-hop flavor into New Orleans while staying true to his storytelling roots. The rap megastar will be taking the Super Bowl stage fresh off a Grammy triumph. He claimed 2 of the night's biggest awards, including Song and Record of the Year, for the Drake diss track, Not Like Us. Will he perform that? We don't know just yet.
But is he going to wear that Canadian tuxedo?
Also a really important question.
Yeah. Well, the Raptors are celebrating the 25th anniversary of Vince Carter's iconic dunk.
Yeah, on February 12th, the team will honor Carter's dunk during its GOAT Night theme game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The first 5,000 fans in the arena, they're going to receive a limited edition shirt featuring the Toronto legend. The Raptors introduced GOAT Nights this season to honor the greatest of all Toronto icons that have significantly impacted basketball throughout the city. It has been 25 years, and that moment is still so iconic.
It's 5:59, holding at 5 below zero. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Thank you for watching and for joining us. CTV News at 6 is coming up next. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you at 7.